When I think of legendary horror survival games, my mind quickly rushes to the likes of Resident Evil 1, Silent Hill, Clock Tower, and System Shock. Despite its lineage, Alone in the Dark is often excluded from the conversation of horror survival, especially in the modern era of gaming. And it's not because the first three games are bad, they were just dwarfed in success by games that were directly inspired by them. No one could have predicted the meteoric rise of Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Basically, Alone in the Dark walked so they could run. But now here we are in 2024. Silent Hill 2 Remake has just come out. The Resident Evil 2 Remake has been out a few years now. Resident Evil 1 got the remaster treatment, but no one really knows if it will be remade like 2, 3, and 4. Hell, Silent Hill is about to be flooding the horror scene with a large catalog of new games coming, having started with the, in my opinion, pretty damn good Silent Hill: The Short Message. Horror fans are eating pretty good right now, even if it is mostly just fancy leftovers. Me personally, I hope every classic horror game gets remade. I don't give a fuck, straight up. I do not give a shit. Keep giving me remakes. As long as they're making like original IPs as well, keep making the remakes. You know, keep doing what Resident Evil and Silent Hill are doing. Anyway, this is where I would keep my copy of the Dead Space 2 remaster, remake, whatever, if there were one. Fucking EA. So I'm fairly excited about the horror remakes. Not necessarily because I care about updated graphics, but because I loathe, I detest tank controls. Hate them. I understand and respect their importance in the early days of the genre, and I do have a deep respect for it, which we'll discuss maybe a little later. But largely, I do not enjoy tank controls, so the updated horror games are suddenly very accessible to me, very, very much appreciated. So as I'm putting together this list for my games this year, I saw on a website of ill repute, Alone in the Dark 2024. And, you know, that was a curious site. I had no idea Alone in the Dark had a new game coming out, let alone a remake of the original. So, you know, I hit that little magnet and added it to my queue, and it sat on my hard drive all year till around September, which is when I eventually got around to playing it. And let me tell you, I fucking hated this game. So this is a reimagining of 1993 Alone in the Dark, right? You play as Edward Carnby, who is portrayed by David Harbour. You might know him from being married to Lily Allen. Or you play as Emily Hartwood, portrayed by Jodie Comer. You know, she's in a bunch of Star Wars stuff. So Emily explains to Carnby that her uncle Jeremy Hartwood has gone slightly mad and is hanging out at this house for rich people who are burdens on their family. They arrive and basically everyone's like, Jeremy's gone missing. So they go looking for him. In the search, multiple times they are transported to this nightmare world that's like either of Jeremy's design or like some kind of trick brought on by ancient magics. Okay, so basically all the people in the house are part of this cult who make sacrifices yearly to this ancient tree on the property of the Torchetto mansion. Doing so maybe grants some blessings or bounties. It's never made clear what they get for doing so, but what is made clear is that they do not make the sacrifice. The ancient being that resides within the tree will wake from its slumber and kill everything in its path. So basically, Jeremy made a deal with a dark being that would basically lock him in this realm while making the tree slumber without the need to sacrifice it. Which is kind of like, what's the fucking point? Jeremy, someone's still being sacrificed in a way. He's never stated how long like his sacrifice holds. So it's like Jeremy sitting there being sacrificed in a different way. It's still a sacrifice. It still defeats the purpose. Whatever. So it seems like there's like would be more to the game, but that's really like most of the important parts. You go through the entire game thinking that Jeremy made a deal with this hyper ominous being, only to learn that the people of Tushetto are members of a blood cult that are going to sacrifice a fucking child to their wrathful god, which is fine on its own, but both of the characters experience the same side of the fucking story. So I started the game and I played as Carnby, right? And he would run into Emily and he'd be talking crazy to her and she's like, okay. So I was just like, man, I cannot wait to see her side of the story, and you'll see how unhinged Carnby looks in relation to what she's experiencing, and it's just the same fucking shit. Both characters experience largely the same events, except everyone's kind of just like nice to Carnby, like they just put up with him and just like, oh, he's just a guy, but then they're like mean and vitriolic and violent towards Emily. It's fucking like maybe considering her twist, like I can kind of get it, but even like considering her twist, it's still fucked. Like for example, to illustrate what I mean, here is an early meeting of a character in a game. The guy's name is Batiste. They both meet him in the same spot at the same time, and let's just take a look at how this character introduces themselves to each character.
Don't let them get inside, compare. They're not the good kind.
Is this your store?
There are no owners here. We both strangers in Jeremy's story.
Jeremy did this. How?
The pact with the dog man. Jeremy warned us, but we didn't think much of it.
I'm Detective Edward Carnby. I was hired by Jeremy's niece to find him.
Oh, yeah? How much she paying you?
$150.
She's sure getting her money's worth tonight. Emily? Is that you?
Batiste?
How'd you get here?
I was back at Dorsetto. Looking for my Uncle Jeremy?
Jeremy's your uncle. I didn't know.
Why would you?
Why does he do that to her? Like, why does he do that specifically to her? This is the fucking 1920s. Like, don't take this the wrong way, but ain't no fucking way a black dude finna choke slam a tiny little white woman in the 1920s and only tap the little white guy on the shoulder. Are you fucking kidding me? And you know, what was it, 40 years after this was the Emmett Till incident. Like, 40 years later, it was still pretty fucking rough even for black men who didn't do the things. So why is he choke slamming the little white girl in 1920? And it's not even, like, that's not even the end of it. Like, the dude knows Emily, and after choke slamming her, he immediately recognizes her. Like, what the fuck? And it's not even just this, like, everyone's kind of just like a cunt to Emily for no fucking reason. And even, again, considering her twist, it still doesn't make sense. But so back to them, like, experiencing things. So in my playthrough of Carnby, he's like, hey, I'm gonna go in this closet, and Emily's like, cool, have fun, but in like a really sarcastic way. Like, okay, go in the closet, weirdo. Why did I hire you? I hired you, and what the fuck is happening? Yeah, why can we never see the other side of that interaction? Like, I wanted to see Emily be like, I wanted to see if he's actually disappearing in the closet. Like, does reality only exist for the person you're playing as? Like, what the fuck? Clearly the game wants to be like Resident Evil 2 Remake, which is a good thing. You know, Resident Evil 2 Remake is fantastic, and in my opinion, Resident Evil 2 Remake is the pinnacle of what Resident Evil can be. So I find it awesome Alone in the Dark wants to be like it. I just wish the devs spent more time figuring out what that actually meant. I wish they spent more time on the Resident Evil 2 parts of the game. Also, why in the fuck was David Harbour and Jodie Comer needed for this game? How much of the development budget was sucked out just to get them? And just straight up, I love David Harbour. I love his role in Stranger Things. I like a couple of his movies. I love him in Lily Allen's Husband. But like, of the two major actors in the game, it felt like 90% of the time he was just phoning shit in. There were a few instances here and there where I was like, wow, where's this voice acting been the whole time? Where Jodie, on the other hand, you know, they straight up kill it. Like, every scene that they're in, they give it their all. Like, it felt like Jodie gave a shit about this job. Unlike Harbour, who had felt like he was only there to be like a face of it and not much else. But again, back to that first point. How much of the budget was sucked out of development just to get these two? Like, did we learn nothing after Callisto Protocol? We don't need actors trying to sell us games. Alone in the Dark has the name recognition. All they had to do was make a great game. Like, if it weren't how weird the story is in this game, I'd say it was a return to form for Alone in the Dark. But I can't really overlook the stories, because for me, horror games are first and foremost a storytelling vessel. And it is the best storytelling genre. Like, as much as I don't like FNAF, even it knows storytelling is king. I mean, FNAF has 28 fucking books to tell more of its story. It is more books than games, because the story is always more important. Now, do not get me wrong. I do not think that we as players should have to consume material outside of mainline titles to be able to understand the story. Looking at you, fucking Kingdom Hearts. But I don't think more lore makes a good game. I don't want you to leave this thinking, oh, he thinks because the books. No, it just, there's obviously like a rift between the two games where one has too much story, but they understand the story is important. One just doesn't have enough, and it could have taken, like, you know, a page or two. You probably could have took a couple of books from fucking FNAF, and they wouldn't have noticed because they got so fucking many of them. I don't think that lore, like a large lore dump, makes for a better game by any means. But Pieces Interactive, I think they should have put more into store and the story and the lore development. That's just my opinion on it. So let's talk about some nicer stuff. While I do have some harsh criticisms of the game, I have some nice things to say. I do. I think it's a fine game mechanically. The gameplay is great. It feels like Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7 at the same time, which is great. Which when you think about that, it's kind of funny because, like, Alone in the Dark inspired Resident Evil, and now Resident Evil is returning the favor by inspiring Alone in the Dark. It's pretty great. So the overall gameplay, it's great. I really enjoyed solving little puzzles to find all the lanyards, and on that, I really like the lanyards. Like, whoever decided to call the collectibles lanyards deserves more than whatever Pieces gave them. They deserve more than whatever Pieces got, and I hope the rest of their life is good and great. Lanyap. If you ever wondered how to say that word, it's like if you see it out and about, lanyap. That's lanyap. Lanyap. Love that word. Love saying lanyap. It's such a cool word to look at, too. Lanyap. Anyway, so combat is on the cusp of doing something really special, but it ended up just kind of falling on the dog shit side of the spectrum. So the game wants to be both like survival horror and action horror, which has potential as an idea, but what we get instead is unavoidable enemy encounters with targets you can soak up ammo, and no ammo to use against them. I find this most trying when you get to the steamboat, and while it can be avoided, the game seems to be nudging you to fight every single enemy in the area. It notes this by dotting the area with plenty of resources. Ammo, not one of them, but still a lot of resources. We as players are primed to see this vast collection of resources as a sign for a standoff or an arena fight, you know? Which is what I thought it was until I played through Emily's campaign and just blew through it. But I spent so much time on that damn steamboat because I thought that's what the game wanted. Most of the combat is like that, though. Granted, there's not much, which is I'm so grateful for, because there's always far too few resources for too many enemies. The final boss fights are kind of tight, though. One of them reminds me of fighting the marker at the end of Dead Space 2, but way easier. And the other one, like the final boss, reminds me of the Hive Mind in Dead Space, which I thought was really cool. I thought it was a neat boss fight. It's kind of tricky, but it's a lot of fun. Oh, and then there's this one part where the game suddenly swapped to tank controls and fixed camera angles for like the tiniest little bit. And, you know, I kind of loved that. It didn't overstay its welcome, and it was a lovely way to remind players that tank controls fucking suck. But seriously, it was a nice little nod to what the game was, and it visually looked like the game. Like, seeing it in those camera angles, it looked like Alone in the Dark. It was really nice. So mechanically, the game's, you know, it's doing its best. It's doing a great job. The gameplay is mostly super smooth, and it just works. And the enemy design also, I'm just gonna jump right ahead to that. The enemy design is bonkers. Let's take a look at some of these guys. Here we got the Molded, Mr. Maggot Man, Skeleton Arm Man, Maggot Arm Man, Bug, Flying Bug, Dr. Mr. Long Arms, Tree. Mechanically, most of these guys are identical, but man, do they look cool. So graphically, the game is just beautiful. From the opening cutscene all the way to the last scene where the gang walk away, everything just looks great. I didn't have a single graphical issue. At the time, I was playing on a Ryzen 7 5700X and a 12 gig 3060 with 16 gigs RAM at about 2300 megahertz. And everything looks great. It's a great looking game. You couldn't pay me to lie about that. It just plainly, flat out looked great. The gameplay was smooth too. Like, I experienced no technical issues or hangups. It seems like a very well optimized game, and which is a shame because like the game sucks. So the game, you know, it offers a decent amount of like amenities and quality of life, but I don't think it's worth any of that when the thing that drives the game is fucking shit. So I'm sorry that this review it's kind of a short one, and I know it is. I don't really have a lot to say about this one. I've had a pretty bad time playing this, and I complained almost the entire time, which is a real shame. It really is. I was really excited to sit down and play this and experience Alone in the Dark for the first time. I went in with high expectations because at this point of the game's release, you know, when I played it, horror remakes were absolutely killing it. Dead Space, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 4, and now, you know, Silent Hill 2, which I'm playing right now. It's fucking killer. It has some technical issues for me right now, but otherwise it's fucking killer. So, you know, it was easy to walk into this game and being like, yeah, it's going to be like those other guys because those other guys are inspired by it. You know, I was excited. But it's not. And it only serves to hurt the franchise just a little bit more than it already has been. Alone in the Dark has not had a good run in a long time, since at least 1993. I feel horrible saying that, but it's true. Like almost every, I don't know, I haven't played all the other ones, but like through critical reception, all of the Alone in the Dark games are widely panned. And this is just another, like, it's not as bad as those from what I can tell, but it's not enough to revitalize the image and revitalize the brand. So don't buy into the remake hype for this one. It's fucking shit. Don't buy this game. Don't even pirate it. You will not get your time back. Your time and your internet can be used to do something more productive, like, I don't know, watching that shitty Resident Evil Netflix adaptation. Anyway, this is it. This is the video. That's it. Slosh out.